based in Moscow. I actually worked with Red in Texas. He hosted me at a trainership in American law, little bit. So we also have beautiful Kate LORENZ from Hyde Park Art Centre. She's executive director, and Reddy Wood. He's from Austin, Texas. And today we're gonna speak about growing your business, growing your startup in US, how to incorporate this. And Kate will tell us about change management. Actually, I'm doing my course in MBA in the Netherlands, and we have this course, change management. So you have this opportunity today for free, have this course. So
it's different.
It's different, but anyway. So we're gonna start. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I bet you can hear me.
No.
Here. Is it better this way?
How's everyone doing? Good? All right, well, welcome. As Rustam said, my name is Radney Wood. I'm an attorney in Austin, Texas, and I represent small businesses and startups, entrepreneurs. How many people here run a business or want to run a business one day? There's a few of you, right? All right, awesome. How many people are running a business right now? You, fantastic. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of that initial stage, right? So if you're interested in starting a business, obviously it's going to be different in different jurisdictions, the U.S. versus Russia, but there's a lot of overlap there too, right? A lot of overlap in terms of how to actually start the company and what makes good sense in doing that. From a legal perspective, there's some hoops you have to jump through that, Rustam, he worked with me when he came to Texas for 3 weeks. An attorney like this here in Russia would help you with this process here, but filing the documents with the state, incorporating, deciding what type of entity you want to be. In the States, we have essentially two types that most companies are, which are corporations and limited liability companies. And they have different tax issues, and depending on which one you pick, might actually determine what type of company you become. Right? So I typically represent small businesses and startups, and I use those things differently because a small business is anything from a hair salon to a restaurant, an antique store, right? Kind of anything you want to do that you're just kind of running by yourself, and it could have one employee, it could have 100 employees, but you're just plodding along, running your business. A startup in the US, very specific, right? So you're out there to raise money, take on investors, scale the business, usually have a timeline, maybe 5 to 10 years in which you want to sell your business. So who here wants to start a small business versus start a startup? Small business. All right, startup. All right, okay. So we can talk a little bit more about startups then, since no one wants to start a small business, although that's what I operate is a small business, right? I'm a law firm. We have 14 attorneys, 23 total employees, and so I'm more on the small business side, right? I pick an entity, a tax pass-through entity is what my company is, kind of like an LLC, so that I don't have to pay extra taxes. I don't take on investor dollars, and we operate on an ongoing basis. But with a startup, typically in the States, well, let's start at the very beginning, right? If you're starting a company, you have a startup, you have an idea, right? So you have your idea. There's a big misconception, a lot of people, you think your idea is worth something. It's not. It's not worth anything. And there's another big misconception that you need to protect your idea. You don't. You need to tell everyone about your idea. So unless you've developed some new technology that's patentable and you're a scientist, right, or an engineer, that's different. If you have that type of technology, then yes, of course, develop it, talk with your patent attorney, don't disclose it. But if you have a great idea of like a new software you want to build or a new product you want to bring to market, that's not protectable with intellectual property. And the more people you talk to about your idea, the better it will become because you need feedback. So before you run off and start a company and incorporate and do all that, you should take surveys. It can be informal, talk to all your friends, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. And then it can be very formal, which is like literally send out a survey through email or Facebook and have people answer questions.
And then there's different ways to go from there. Then once you get enough feedback, you kind of have your idea, then you actually, get a landing page. Websites are super easy now. Just get a landing page that kind of describes what you're doing and coming soon, this, right, whatever that service is. And then start taking email addresses down, like any sort of contact information, and anything you can do to kind of build momentum prior to jumping all in, right? But you do have to jump all in. And that's kind of the scary part of being an entrepreneur and starting something, is that you can't kind of do it. You just have to all the way do it, right? And so once you go through the idea stage, once you get these surveys, once you're building your idea, and then you kind of start going to market, you start to A/B test, right? A/B test means you give out different options, because you're not going to be perfect the first time. So what if the product was this price, or what if it was that price? What if we provided them with this service on top of that product? And so you start sending out these A/B tests to different groups, all these emails you've been getting, and you start getting great feedback. And that's how you're kind of testing and developing the idea as an entrepreneur, as you're really starting your company. Once you do that, if you kind of get some traction, you have your idea, then you're going to go to an attorney. They're going to file your paperwork. You're going to be a Delaware C corporation. It's what we do. I'm sure there's something similar in Russia. Maybe you go offshore or something.
But why Delaware? Just let's discuss this, because in Russia, even in Russia, when a small business or startup going to go global, they want to start startup in US, they going with the idea, okay, Delaware.
Yep.
Why Delaware?
There's nothing special about Delaware.
Yeah.
Really, Delaware is the state because, for a little history lesson, years ago, Delaware is a very tiny state, right? I don't know how well you all know the US, but Delaware is very tiny, not very relevant. So years ago, they said, we need to do something to attract businesses, so let's just create the laws that are the most friendly to businesses as possible. And this was a time before what I would call in the US the race to the bottom, which is like, let's everyone just make it as business friendly as possible. Like, states used to say, like, we care about education, we care about healthcare, and we're going to tax people, and we're going to do these things. And then Delaware comes along and they say, no, don't worry about any of that stuff. We want all the businesses to come here. And so it just got, this is like back in the 60s and into the 70s, and so it became a place that all these really powerful businesses started to get incorporated and started to get familiar with. And then now what has happened is pretty much all of the institutional investors. And what I mean by that is, in the US, you have people that as a profession invest money into companies. You've heard of like VC funds, which are venture capital funds, or PE funds, which are private equity funds, or angel networks. Angels is a term for really rich people that want to invest in companies. And now all of these groups, they have legal documents from their lawyers that are made for Delaware companies. Because again, we have 50 states with different laws. So if you have one document that's built for a state, and you're not going to negotiate that document with your company you're talking to, they have to be in that state. So oftentimes, it's the institutional people that kind of force you to be in Delaware. So instead of waiting to be forced to go to Delaware, oftentimes we'll just create it in Delaware. And so that's really the full purpose of why people choose Delaware, which is kind of funny. People think Delaware has the best laws. They don't. Like, Texas's laws are just as good, New York's laws are just as good. Delaware's laws are a little bit more friendly to businesses, but not even so much anymore, because all these other states have tried to become more friendly as well. It's really about what's been used for so long, it's become common to be there.
So when you're starting a business, it's not necessarily going to Delaware, right?
Yeah, so to Rustam's point, you don't have to move to Delaware.
Yeah.
No one lives in Delaware.
So it's
All right.
So am I right that it's investment friendly? But if you open a company in New York or anyway in US, it is the same business with the same outcomes of it. I mean.
Yeah, kind of. So first off, when I'm talking about being in Delaware, you just file paperwork in the state of Delaware. So you say my company's in Delaware, but you're still in Austin, Texas, right? And your company's actually based in Austin, Texas. So then you file another piece of paper in Texas that says, oh, by the way, I'm a Delaware company, I'm here in Austin, even though no one in the company is actually in Delaware, right? It's just, I know it sounds silly, kind of is when you say it out loud, but that's how it works, right? So it doesn't matter what state you're in, a lot of people or a lot of companies will be based in another state from where they are, even if they don't have any employees or people there. You literally have a post office box there that says, this is where my company started, this is our headquarters, but really we're in Texas. But the law now governing my company, because my company is started there, is Delaware law. But you could be in any state after that. And again, the states are, the difference in law between states is not like the EU, right? The EU kind of came the opposite way, where it was all these separate countries coming together to create a compact, right? And so now you have EU law, which is the commonality that the different states in Europe can't go outside of that. Ours kind of started the other way. It started the top kind of down. And so the commonality between our states is much more similar. So it's, even though it's different, it's not that different. You can kind of, no matter what state you're in legally, like I'm an attorney in Texas, and I'm licensed in New York and in Texas, but I do work for companies in other states because the law is so similar, especially in the type of law that I do, which is fundraising, capital raise, like helping startup companies grow and invest money and stuff.
So let's speak about, so we have a company, we have a website, lending and everything. We need investments and we need something inside, yeah, Kate. Maybe you'll tell us what we need in terms of management from your perspective, from your experience to the companies.
Yeah, so I work for a nonprofit organization. Who knows what a nonprofit is in the U.S.?
It's kind of volunteering, or?
Well, it can rely on volunteering. A nonprofit is essentially a legal status in the United States that that people can give money to the nonprofit and get a tax benefit for that. And nonprofits have an agreement that we exist for the public good, meaning any profits we make, we can and do make profits. They just don't go to shareholders. Instead, they go back into the organization's work and mission. So it runs like any other business, just our money comes from a different place, and our accountability is to the public rather than to the bottom line. So I say that to say that running any business probably takes lots of things, but and my organization is 80 years old. We were founded in 1939 as part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal during the Great Depression. And I say that to say that I often say we're an 80-year-old startup because we behave very much like a startup and have reinvented ourselves a number of times and are in the midst of another reinvention right now. So I think that we've been doing a lot of what Rad was talking about, is when going through a big change or wanting to make a big change, whether that be growth, launching, or a pivot, it's really important to kind of listen to your customers or your market. In our case, for us, that looks like listening to our community. My organization is called the Hyde Park Art Centre, and our mission is to support artists and have an intersection between artists and the public, and building a community and community around art and art making. So we, in thinking about a big change, did a big listening tour with our community to hear what was needed and what would be relevant. So I think that no matter what, you have to stay focused on your customers in your case. Yeah.
But in a company we have shareholders, and the CEO should bring profit to shareholders. In your company, you have this concept of stakeholders, right? So what is it?
What's a stakeholder?
Yeah.
That's a good question. In our case, and every organization will be different, but in our case, our primary stakeholders are artists. We have a very broad definition of what an artist is. So if any of you wanted to come learn how to make ceramics or pick up a paintbrush, you would be an artist to us. Or if anybody walks into our gallery space and wants to learn something, you would be an artist to us. So for us, our primary stakeholders are artists or makers who participate in that community. And secondly, we really think of ourselves as a neighborhood and kind of citywide civic institution. We're in Chicago, Illinois, and want to have an influence on what the cultural community in Chicago looks like. So the city is in many ways a stakeholder of ours. And then lastly, we have stakeholders that are our funders. Or people who kind of support the work, but a big part of my job is balancing funder needs and our actual mission and community's needs, and making sure that the former doesn't pervert our mission to our community.
So anyway, you need to bring not profit, but something like social profit, yeah,
Right.
to your stakeholders instead of startups where you need to bring money and pay back investors.
Right.
So Red, it became international when companies doing round A, round B, etc., etc. So what is it? Could you say us and could you tell the story about round investments? So we have like a first stage investment, we have a second stage. It's common for venture field.
Yeah.
So what is it?
So yeah, if you go this startup route, right, and you decide you're going to raise capital to fund your company, the difference between a small business and startup in the very beginning is a small business needs to make enough money to pay for its expenses, right? Because you don't have money from anywhere else. You have to say, I have a service, I'm a lawyer, I'm going to bring in clients, I'm going to charge them per hour, they're going to pay me, I'm going to pay rent, I'm going to pay my taxes, I'm going to pay for my software, I'm going to hire employees, and I can do that on the money I bring in. When you're a startup, you say, hey, I'm going big, I need enough money. Some people say pour gasoline on a fire, right? I need enough money to really launch. So you go out to investors and you seek funding. And in the US, there's a pretty, and I'm sure it's gone across global and different people probably have different names for it, but there's a pretty tried and true way of doing that, right? There's only two ways to raise money, really, unless you have a really rich granddad who just gives you money. You're either going to take it as debt, someone's going to give you a loan, or you're going to take it as equity, right? You're going to give them a portion of your company. Ideally, people tend to want debt, right? Because you don't have to give them any portion of your company. But when you're an early stage company, it's really hard to get someone to write you debt check because the banks look at you and say, where's your money? And you say, oh, I don't have any yet. I have this great idea though, and it's going to make millions of dollars. And they say, good luck, come back when you make millions of dollars. And so instead you have to go out and try to raise the capital traditionally through some sort of equity raise. Now in the States, we've developed something we call convertible debt or convertible equity. And it's an instrument that you take on as debt, but that converts into equity later. And it's a bit complex, and unless you want to go to law school and become a venture attorney, I won't bore you with that. But that's kind of your first stage of investment is going to be through this really unique instrument that gives investors the opportunity to claim they have debt on your company, but that will convert into equity in the future at a better rate than anyone who ever comes in again. So it's really nice for the investor because they're taking a big risk. Because if you invest in a company that has no money and just a great idea, yeah, I have all these emails, I had a splash page, and I did all this A/B testing, I'm a genius. Okay, you don't have any money yet, I'm taking a risk. So we developed this instrument that kind of gives these investors the best kind of options as the company grows. Typically that first round is like real early stage. That's going to be, we call it friends, families, and fools, because it better be your friend, your family, or a complete fool that's going to give you money early on. And you have to kind of go to your network and do that. So traditionally, you're going to have to go and raise tens of thousands of dollars, in the US at least, from this group of people. And yourself. You better put your own money in. If you want to go talk to an investor in 6 months and say, hey, I raised this money and here's my metrics. I'm actually started to sell some stuff. We're spending more than we're making, but hey, I have a product. They're going to want to see that you put your own money in as well. So you said, hey, I cashed out my retirement fund. Or hey, I sold my car. I put my own money in. I was able to get friends, family, and fools to give me another $100,000. And we've done all these great things. And now I'm coming to you looking for more money. And that next round is what we call a seed round. And the seed round is the first time that you're selling equity directly. Because early, again, remember, it's convertible debt. It starts as debt, turns into equity. Now we're just going, we're going to do it in equity. And then each round that you raise, it's really simple. It just becomes a A round, a B round,
And more money.
C round. Yeah, and more money. You bring more money, and you're giving up more control, right? So when you see these big companies in the US, let's take WeWork, because it's a total disaster, and it's a terrible company. I hope they got that on camera. And they've raised like 7 or 8 rounds, right? So So it's something like that. I think they had like a G round or something. Those people that started in the beginning the owners don't own a majority of the company anymore, right? Typically, if you raise more than 3 rounds, you're going to own less than the majority of your company. So depends on how far you want to go with that startup thing, like Slack, a company like that. I bet the majority of the owners don't own a majority of the company anymore. You know, after about that 3rd round, you actually give up control. They have more board seats, they have more equity. Sometimes people will have shares that give them more voting rights so they can always maintain power. That's how Mark Zuckerberg is still in power with Facebook, is he actually sold the majority of the company, but his shares vote 10-1. So his grandkids will control that company. Hopefully we'll be bankrupt by then. But yeah, so like this is the process you kind of go by, is like this A, B, C round, and then you give up portion of your company. So you have to be very strategic about it as you're doing it, so that you don't want to give up too much of your company too early.
So when you're going to investor, you offer him different ways of putting money in your company. And the thing we're doing in Russia, but we don't have this all this mechanism. I mean, with the regulatory, we use option agreement and we use convertible debt also. So technically, how to ask for money? Okay, you went to your lawyer, your attorney, you drafted a contract, good one, and you just sending it to anyone, finding a fool, or how people usually do in the US, from let's say from a commercial sector and from non-government.
Sure. So from a commercial sector, when you go out there and you're going to raise funds, you need 2 things for sure, and a few other things to start. But the 2 things you need are a term sheet, which is you basically going here with a sheet to investors that says, this is what I'm offering you. And it's like 2 pages usually. It can be much longer, rarely shorter, but it says what rights you're giving the investor, how much money you're looking for, what you plan on doing with that money. It's very cut and dry. And then you need a pitch deck. And a pitch deck is like a PowerPoint presentation. It's very beautiful, and it spells about the story of your company, what your company does. And the idea of the pitch deck is it needs to show that it needs to tell a story that you're solving a problem. Especially in the US, like most investors want you to solve a problem. Because if there's a problem and you're solving it, there's money. If you just invented the problem, or there's no real big problem there, then even if it's a nice service, then there's so many other services out there, it's gonna be real hard for you to differentiate and become the type of company an investor wants to invest in. So this pitch deck needs to be, honestly, very visually beautiful. It needs to tell the story of solving a problem, how you've done it, and then show that you know that industry, right? It's like your homework. You go to your teacher and say, I know this industry inside and out. Did you know that 70% of the U.S. economy is moving towards the gig economy, and I'm here because I've built a web service that will allow you to connect? Like, you need to be able to hit numbers like that, and the whole idea behind that is to get an investor to be like, this person knows what they're doing. I really want to talk to this person. And the whole point of the pitch deck is just to get a conversation. That's all it is. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to tell the story, so that then that opens a door so that you can sit down with them and then do it in person. And that's where it's really powerful. You sit down with your term sheet, go in person, and really sell them that way. But the pitch deck is to get the opening. Those are the 2 things you really need when going.
So this one is all about selling, active selling. You're pitching, you get a negative from the public. Because near in Arbat we have also pitch club in Moscow, maybe you know. And startups, very fresh, going there, and a lot of negative going back to start. They say, I don't want any money from there. I'll close my startup. But anyway, this is good. And Kate, how you do this with an NGO?
Yeah, really, really different, but some similarities as well. Probably different in that our money comes from a number of different sources, and the way that we attract or seek or pursue money from each source varies. So we get our money, and this is probably typical of most not-for-profits. So many not-for-profits will have different funding models. Ours is primarily through individuals. Our board of directors, who are volunteers, to your point back there, we staff are paid. Board of directors, through our friends, families, and fools, who we do a lot of fundraising. There's literally a term called fundraising in the nonprofit sector, which is about various ways of introducing people to the mission and the work in the organization to develop a relationship so that you then can ask them for money. Second, institutional support. So in the US, there are institutional entities that are set up and have a special tax status whose job it is to give out money. So people with wealth can establish a foundation, and essentially the money sits in the market, and as it grows and makes money, that foundations are required to give away 5% of their annual value each year. So to not-for-profit institutions. And that process looks pretty different because most institutional funders have their own mission and their own guidelines and their own definition of how they want to support the public good. And so nonprofits like us try to tell a story about how our work is fulfilling an institutional funder's mission. So it's about kind of storytelling in that way, and there's often a formal grant process where, and every foundation has kind of a different process, but usually it's a grant application proposal that's written when that's invited. And then thirdly, our other big source of support, and I've already told these guys when I get back home, we're having our big annual gala. Event-based fundraising is a very significant part of the philanthropic sector, the nonprofit sector in the U.S., where we're hosting a gala. It's a big party where people buy tables and invite their friends, and we plan to raise $500,000, which is about 20% of our budget in one event. And it's a way to raise the money and also tell the organization's story. We in our industry, we always say you can't live with them and you can't live without them about galas because they're a pain to run. They suck up a lot of time and energy, but there's a lot of people, for whatever reason, who give through a gala setting and like the social aspect of that type of philanthropy, and so we kind of can't get around it because it's a big source of one-time money. Yeah.
So, am I right that you usually do these events and attract people there, showing your mission, your vision? And you match goals of institutional investors, of founders with your organization, right?
Yeah, the gala is a giant party. Like people are, you kind of tell the story more subtly. You're lucky if people really leave understanding what it is that you do. They're drinking, they're having fun, they're with their friends, and you want them to just leave with a really good feeling and hope that you can have a conversation as like a conversation opener later. Yeah.
And if they're drunk, they tend to give more money.
Exactly. We have a paddle raise where people auction off the right to give us money, essentially.
It's a great one.
Yeah. And, I think the startups also doing the same in coworkings. We have also the chain of coworkings we work in Moscow. They just open it here. I don't know why they choose this moment, but anyway.
They don't have a lot of money left anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, they started it, and you have this like pitching with a pizza party, with a beer party. So you're doing this and organize it. I think in Russia we don't have so great experience on this, and I think we need to promote this idea and doing this with our investors, clients, etc., because this one is a good idea. You pitching them not like I'm pitching and selling you, but you're doing some networking even and social good also. Okay, what about the next step? For example, you got investments and you have problem with, as usually.
There's always a problem.
Yeah. You hired a lot of employees. You hired someone else, went to big 4 companies, they made an audit for you. So now you don't have money. So what is the option for startup? How to find a new one? Maybe going to crowdfunding or crowd investing or maybe leave the country. What to do?
Yeah, so I don't know what the numbers are, but the vast majority of startups don't make it, right? You take on investor dollars, you try. If you can't reach that level, and what we're seeing today in the US, which is kind of troubling for our economy, is there's a lot of these companies going public that are actually losing money. Like Uber loses money, Lyft loses money, Slack loses money. WeWork lost so much money they couldn't even go public. So there's this idea that if you put enough money into it and grow fast enough, that you'll find a way to make money. Isn't it a great business model? But it does happen a lot, right? And so if you grow, and then you don't have enough money to actually make it, there's a few things to do, right? One, if you're a savvy entrepreneur, is sometimes you just need to shut the business down, right? Don't hold on to an idea too long. You gave it a shot, you put 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of your life into it, and it didn't take off, and don't spend the next 4 years continuing to make the same mistake, right? I see that happen a lot with entrepreneurs. They fall in love with an idea and they can't let it go, and then they'll spend half a decade or more failing. And I don't want to say it in a bad way. I think failure is great. And I think one of the things in the US that we've done is we've kind of championed failure. Like you fail, but you learn so much you can do it again. And you just learn. You view it as a learning experience. But having that sense to be, okay, I'm putting this down, I'm doing something different. It's very important. The other is to raise more money, right? This does happen a lot where you're, okay, I've raised a certain amount, but I need more. You might need to do it at a lower value than what you've previously raised at, right? So when I was talking about equity, what you do is you say, hey, when you go to invest, you say, hey, my company's worth $10 million. I want you to put $2 million in. So I'll give you 20% of the company. So, okay, here's $2 million, $10 million valuation, here's your 20%. Now I go along, I spend all the money, I have no money left. Maybe I need to raise more money, and then now I'm gonna do it at maybe a $6 million valuation, right? That makes that investor very upset because they still only have 20% of the company, but now 20% of 6 million is, I'm terrible at math, probably 1.25 million or something. So they've lost, $750,000, right? So, but you might need to do that. Now, Rustam referred to crowdfunding as well. There's multiple different types of crowdfunding. You're probably most familiar with like GoFundMe and Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You can't raise money for your company that way traditionally unless you're a products or services company and you're basically just pre-selling your product, right? You go on there and say, hey, I have this new cool skateboard that turns into nunchucks or something, and like I'll pre-sell it to you. And if you give $100, you'll be one of the first people to get it. We do have a system now where you can raise money this way through equity and debt like you do to investors, but it's incredibly complex. Most companies do not do it. We thought it was really going to take off when it passed in 2016, this kind of, we call it equity crowdfunding, but there's so many regulations around it, and it's very expensive to do, that it's not a good fit for most people. And traditionally, you only do it after you've raised about the first amount from friends, families, and fools, and other investors. Then you might go and say, hey, I already have half, and I'm going to go online and get the other half. And people see that you're almost there. And it better be a cool idea, like bars and restaurants do really good with this. Tech companies do not. But bars and restaurants, they've opened many bars and restaurants in a town like Austin, can go online and fund that way. But if you're doing that, if you've spent all your money, you're either shutting the company down, you're raising money at a different valuation, or you're leaving the country, as Rustam said.
Yeah, this becomes very common in Russia, but not with leaving the country.
I was going to say, it doesn't happen a lot in the US.
It's more about bankruptcy.
Yeah, you go through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of companies go to bankruptcy, and it happens with the banks. When you have a credit from a bank is not waiting for another reason to prolongate your term. I think crowdfunding is a very interesting thing, and we have it even in Russia, but it's more not officially crowdfunding. And now, as I said before on a conference today, we have a new law. We got a new law on crowdfunding from the next year. Yeah. it's possible to organize your platform and put there your investment proposal, and even you have a hairdresser shop or something else, shop for pets, you're going there to this platform and asking for money, for low money with a low interest, and money that you never find in a bank. That's good. And I also know that UK did with your nonprofit sector with crowdfunding.
Yeah, it's a common way of raising money, especially by individuals, like individual artists will do it. It's interesting to hear Rad talk about startups and the failure rate, because our sector is a little different in that nonprofits rarely die. They tend to go on and on and on for a variety of reasons. One being that often they're trying to solve complex social problems like homelessness. Like if there's a homelessness organization, they're going to keep trying to do their work until homelessness is solved. In the US, unfortunately, that's not likely to be anytime soon. Our organization's mission is about producing new work and supporting artists. We'll never have too much art or too much new work. So we tend to perpetuate on and on. And another part of that is that we're kind of baked into the nonprofit system and have people who care about the institutions and kind of won't let them die. So it's actually quite rare. It happens for sure, but it tends to be scandalous if like a cultural institution closes its doors, especially a well-established one, which is really different than in the for-profit sector. I had a business school professor once say, "You guys never die. Like, you should die. Like, organizations should all die, and then get reborn as something else." But
a good place to work.
Yeah. Well, you can lose your job.
Anyway, okay. And what about artists? So art is very subjective. Someone like it, someone not. And people put this idea on a crowdfunding website and making money there. Is it really works in the US?
Yeah, it's kind of debatable. There's it's a good way to raise money if you have a network of friends, families, and fools who can give money. So if it's kind of on your own back, so to speak, which can work for some, but not others if you don't have that network. And an organization like ours, or many of our organizations, are trying to make things happen for people who don't have their own network already, and are trying to kind of balance out the inequity in that system. But there's an organization in Chicago called 3 Arts that is an organization that gives grants directly to artists, to unrestricted money. An artist will get $25,000 to do whatever they want with. And they started a program where once an artist gets a grant, they're an alumni, and they'll help the artist with crowdfunding. So they'll set up a crowdfunding website, and we'll do a lot of the marketing and push out and kind of infrastructure to make that happen. And artists can raise, several $1,000s. It tends to be like smaller amounts of money, but could be really impactful for doing a project. It's pretty hard in the nonprofit sector to raise significant money crowdfunding. It tends to be for micro grants.
Anyway, it's possible.
Totally possible.
Yeah. You can create your picture, your painting, and trying to sell it, and got even this grant from a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, usually not for. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and when you have a problem also with your startup, for example, and you decided not to leave a country. The way is also to change something in an organization, or when you don't make profit. For example, McDonald's, it was a publication in Bloomberg. McDonald's became big data company. They bought Dynamic Yield company who analyze internet data on customers, do customers review, and they changed their strategy. And sometimes you need to change your strategy also when you are doing business, because you have new trends. For example, we had this trend with Greta. Have you heard about ecological problem at the United Nations? This girl, Do you know?
Oh, Greta.
Yeah,
Oh,
Greta.
Right, Greta
Yeah.
Thunberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and company also decided to switch their business model, saying they are also sustainable, doing something. So sometimes it's more about marketing, but sometimes
Unfortunately.
it's also a way how to create new demand for your product. Like McDonald's, people now speaking about good food, not buying this junk food.
Yep.
But the company trying to change their strategy. And what do you guys think about changing the strategy of the company as a not entire business model, but this from change management perspective?
Do you want us to take that one? So yeah, that's really common in my work. And we, for-profit companies do this too, but we go through what we call a strategic planning process, which every 4 or 5 years, depending on the organization, and it's not required, but it's a way to kind of take a step back and think about the social problem you're trying to solve or the work you're trying to do. And like I mentioned, kind of hear how, analyze how it's working or not working and pivot or change your strategy so that it might work better. And our lens on that is like how effective are we at our mission, and part of that, and then a subplot is and how well are we doing funding our mission. Could we do better with just doing the same thing we're doing but just with more money? And if so, how might we do that? Or do we need to? Would we be more effective, kind of pivoting our work? So we went through a change, or we're kind of in the midst of a change of actually changing our business model entirely. We have a school that anybody can come and take classes to make art. No matter, and it's everyone from professional artists to you or me trying something new, and it's always been on a tuition model where people pay a fee to come take a class. And we found that there were, during one of these change management processes, found that there were many people who weren't, who wanted to be in our classes and wanted to be making art but couldn't because of the tuition. So we're going through a total model shift and are raising money. You could call it venture capital because we're trying to raise a lot up front to kind of sustain and be able to change the business model so that instead of being a tuition-based program, it's one where people can contribute at whatever level they can. Yep.
Yeah, interesting and great. What do you think about change management? And we have also a great case, I think, it's more about legal tech, when Amazon started offering legal services to people. Amazon is a huge company. What do you think about it? Is it a change management of the company, or it's just a trend, Amazon trying to do everything? We have bank, Sberbank in Russia. This organization is also trying to do everything in every field, and people know it very well. They invest in startups, they invest in technology, even a banking service, of course, and a lot of them. So what do you think about this trend in legal field in US?
Yeah, to your point, it's happening quite a bit. I'll answer the first thing about Amazon real quick, and then I'll just go into the idea that you spoke about earlier about companies kind of pivoting and augmenting what their offerings are. I think Amazon is just trying to do everything. I don't think it's mind-boggling now what they don't do. It's like they do everything, right? They started out just selling books. I don't know how you remember, like it literally was just a bookstore online, and now they've taken over the world. So I think they're just trying to get into everything they can. I do think, and this is an off topic, but I think Google, Amazon, Facebook, like the US has some very strict laws about antitrust that have not been enforced in about 40 years, given who our political leadership has been, but that is going to change. I mean, countries ebb and flow, and those companies are going to be they're already in the crosshair right now. They're just doing so many things. They've taken over the economy. And there's a lot of good things from it, but there's a lot of really bad things in the US economy. We talk about startups, and there are less startups now coming out because these big companies are making it almost impossible for new tech companies to come up, because they see what you're doing because you're on Amazon, you're on Google, and then they just replicate it. and then they just do it faster and bigger and better. So it's really just undermining a lot of our entrepreneurship. But that's a conversation for a different day. To your point, look, it's always good to have that ability to pivot. If your idea isn't working, you should definitely pivot, right? You've A/B tested, you've been out there, you've started taking on customers, and if it's not working and you don't know why it's working or not working, right? If you see, oh, I just need more marketing because when I had more money, I was doing it this way, we were getting customers, and then you're just solving for a problem there. But if the product isn't taking off because people don't want it, well, then you're going to need to pivot. Now, one thing that's happened in the U.S. that is very popular these days is something we call social good entrepreneurship. So we've created a different type of company now. It's called a public benefit corporation. So in Kate's world, they're a nonprofit, and they have to have a nonprofit purpose. So under our tax code, you say our purpose is X. In Kate's organization, it's the arts. So all their money has to go towards the arts and then a specific segment of what it is, and that's what they have to do with the money, right? When you're a for-profit company, you have shareholders that own, these investors that invested in your company. Now you have a duty to them to make them money. And so that's two polar opposites. So we've created a third that's called the Public Benefit Corporation, and it exists in about 18 states in the US now. And this one says you have shareholders, you make money, you're going to be for profit, but you also have a purpose that's a nonprofit purpose, that is for the social benefit, and you're allowed to make decisions based on this purpose too. So we have a bunch of companies in the US that do this now, right? We have one called Tom's Shoes. You buy a pair of shoes, and they give a pair of shoes away to people in need, right? There's Warby Parker. You buy glasses, and then they get glasses for a kid in need that needs those things, right? And these, I don't know how well they're actually doing. I have my own critiques on it, but there is this element that people go, oh, I was going to buy a pair of shoes anyway. I might as well get one that helps someone, right? So that's a way of doing it. There's a lot of this, like, we're also about sustainability. If any oil and gas company tells you about sustainability, they're just lying to you. Okay, like
an oil company.
Yeah, an oil company can't use the word sustainability.
With all these spots in the ocean.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, when the public benefit corporations came onto market or onto the scene, we saw in the nonprofit sector a growing trend and pressure from funders for us to be making money. So it was like corporations had pressure to be doing good. Organizations that were doing good suddenly had pressure to make money, because it's like, well, if you can make money and do good, why do you need our money? You can make your own money. And so it was an interesting trend in the sector of trying to impose kind of a market value on work that oftentimes just isn't going to be monetized in the marketplace most effectively. So it's complicated.
I think this one is an example of a trend in a business that first you need to do business ethically. Lawyers, they have own ethics and rules.
Yep.
Yeah, what to do, how to interact with a client, like doctors. I think that's all professions, they have these strict rules, how you need to act while rendering services. And we have also a concept of CSR, corporate social responsibility. Have you heard about it? Someone? So in Russia it's not popular, but it exists and it became popular. Even some legal firms started doing this with pro bono services, with we have Legal Run, so it's marathon, people running for something and making money, giving somewhere. You have also funds, where people can also put a box from entire payment for the good to some social waste. And do you have this in the non-profit sector?
Yeah, the nonprofit sector is often recipients of corporate and social responsibility programs. Grant making or giving money to nonprofits is often part of that mix. Nonprofit is by definition socially responsible. So if we're not socially responsible, that means we're not doing our job. Existentially.
Yeah. So you are like an agent who promote all of this. then Red, from your business, from legal firm, what you actually do. And I know that in Red's company they do free dinner or free lunch in every Friday, so employers can have a free lunch, and this is like social thing because people going in one place, sitting and discussing, and it's like a teamwork also. And this one is good. What I also saw in your company that Kevin promoted this, they buy a book and distribute for free, so people read it, and then they have this free lunch, and everyone is discussing it. It's amazing because it's like a social and it's profitable for people also. What else you are doing, or which programs would you recommend to legal firms or even other firms, because it's applicable everywhere?
So yeah, a couple other, so Rustam is pointing out, it's like the kind of benefits you give to your employees and the people you work with. At the end of the day, if you're spending most of your life at work, you better like the people you work with, and you better build a good community, right? Because we human beings are very communal, and so at the end of the day, it's like community is everything. And so whether you're practicing as an attorney or a construction worker or a teacher, whatever, like you really want to build that environment. So we've tried to develop certain things that we think help build that atmosphere of friendship. So you like the people you work with, and have them enjoy the space. So obviously, yeah, we do Friday lunches for the whole team. We do book club. We also do, every 2 years, we'll pay for our employees to go live somewhere else for a month and like live abroad, go to whatever city you want and work remotely. And we'll pay you to do that once every 2 years as long as you're staying. If you leave before the next year's up, you have to pay us back. It's a kind of retention tool, but also something that they find really interesting and cool because they get to check out different cities in the world. And we also let our employees work from home 1 day a week. Honestly, I'd let them work from home 3 or 4 days a week if they really want to and they're doing their work. Obviously, you want them to come to work just so you can see them, because if they're your friend, you want to see your friend. But yeah, like we do stuff like that I think is really important at the end of the day. Because just practicing law can be very boring. It's very stressful. So yeah, I mean, you know. And Rustam like worked in my office for 3 weeks, and like, yeah, it's great, but it's also you're plugging away, you're on your computer for 12 hours a day, and everyone calls you, it's an emergency, and the next person calls you and it's an emergency, and so it's good to have, you really want to build that foundation wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, to build those bonds with each other that aren't work related. Like we have a time where we stop what we're doing and we talk about anything but work. We call it the 413 because we do it at 4:13 in the afternoon. Just random, I know. But yeah, so we just get together and we just talk about life. And so it's good to have those things built into your company.
And what is good is important to know that in Russia we have a law, social law. I mean, if you feel ill, you feel sick, you go to the doctor, pick this paper or even buy it. And then you think that, oh, I have to leave today for 14 days or something, and company pay you if you are working in a huge company. In US, you don't have this. Am I right that usually company create by yourself but themselves these rules like this retention to work abroad? It's not the law.
There are some laws that apply. So we have like the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, if you're of a certain size. So a lot of our laws in the States are built upon companies reaching a certain size, because remember, there are certain companies that are just a family that runs like a pizzeria. And so they have 6 people. You don't want to say, hey, you can't just hire Italians to do that. You got to be, it's like, well, it's everyone's Italian in the family, like we can't control, like, so if you get big enough though, you have all these rules that apply to you. One is the Family Medical Leave Act, which requires if you get sick, or if a person in your family is having a child, or a person in your family gets sick, you get, your employer has to give you 3 months off. You don't get paid during that time period. You're not required to get paid, but they can't fire you. You're allowed to take 3 months off. Most companies like my own will then we'll pay for you to, right? Like we have a parental leave policy, so if you have a child and you're the primary caregiver to that child, then we pay you for 2 months, and then the third month we give you like half salary or something, and the fourth month we let you work from home, even though you're back. So we just developed that, right? We just kind of thought of it.
Yeah.
But there is law, but they're not good. They don't get paid. It's just like if you get really sick or if you have a child, you can't just get fired, right? Like you gotta give them time off.
Yeah, and the point that you developed something extra above this law. So, and that's good, and a business creating with people and starting with people, that's good. Do you have the same programs in?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think every organization is different, but it sounds like ours are relatively the same size. We have 18, 20 staff, and it's. I think the work environment is quite different because people are there because of the mission and because of the work that they get to do. They're not there for the salaries. We tend to have lower salaries than the for-profit sector, so our retention is really about making sure that people have kind of get to do the work they want to do, and that their work is really stimulating, and kind of giving them permission and the ability to do really interesting projects. And then also the flexibility thing is huge with our employees, of being able to work from home, being able to kind of have autonomy over your time and hours. We do a lot of kind of community building too. Like we have a tradition every staff meeting, we celebrate whoever's birthdays were that month and eat lots of cake. We have kind of kickback Fridays every so often. We have some book clubs that happen every so often as well. And then, I think part of my mission has been to also make sure that we are kind of above and beyond on things like family leave and accommodating extreme life circumstances, which happens. We have a policy where many of our employees are practicing artists or arts professionals themselves, and they get to have a certain amount of time off for their own residency program or their own kind of sabbatical, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, guys, do you have questions to lecturers about growing startup, growing company?
What about opening bank account? Is this term?
To Russians.
Yes.
Yeah.
For foreigners.
In the U.S.?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain. Depends on the bank. Every bank kind of has different rules on this stuff. If you're there in person, you can do it, even if you only have like a passport. If you're not, then typically speaking, you need to get a tax ID number, which you can do. It will take a few months.
If I have an employee identification number, for example.
If you have an employee ID number,
Yeah, like a company, not a person.
so in order to get that company ID number, you need a tax ID number.
No,
You do.
it's not required.
An EIN, an employee ID, you need a tax ID number to get that. It's either going to be associated with a human being's social security number.
Yes, but as a foreigner, I can get an EIN without.
Correct, but you have to put in an application for it.
No, I should leave this blank.
I agree. No, that's what I'm saying. But that application, you leave. I know I do this all the time. You take the application, you leave blank where it says tax ID number, and you submit it, and then you can get your EIN as a foreigner. Now the question is, if you're not showing up in person to open the account, then you have to have the certificate of formation or articles of incorporation. Is going to list who the directors and managers are, and if one of those people shows up, they'll open the account. So you need to have some American on there, or not even American, but someone who's going to be in the States on that list that can take that document in and open a bank account. As long as someone in person is on that list, it doesn't matter if they're foreign or U.S. citizen, the bank will open the account. They just need the person on that formation certificate to be there.
Do I need to show all persons who is on the list? I mean,
No, you just need one of them.
Only one.
Only one of them. Any one of them has the power to do it. Does not need to be American. It just needs you need to be on the certificate of formation. Some of them might require, they might ask for an American as well. Like I think we had a startup that was, the founder was Israeli, and so he was there and he was opening the account, but then he had like someone else in the company who was not a manager, but was American, and they like asked them to like co-sign something. But again, every bank, the interesting thing about this is that the banks are different. So like one bank will just say no to you straight away, and another one will be like, yeah, that's enough information. I'll give you a bank account.
What is the best one?
That is a good question. I'm still trying to figure out. I think Bank of America seemed to be pretty easy going, like willing to open bank accounts for foreigners a little bit more easy than others.
And it kind of differs branch by branch sometimes of when of who you happen to get. I think has been our
And do you have the services, because we are working with foreign companies and help to business from Russia go to Europe, for example, and now the trend is with KYC, it's really strict. It became strict, so you can go online and open a bank account. It was some time, and guys invented Revolt or something. It's online service. You can open electronic bank account electronically. It's electronic funds. Do you have something like this, or your system is more monopolized by these big players?
No, we have plenty of online banks. With if you Google U.S. online banks, there'd be a ton of them. Yeah.
Like Stripe, for example.
Stripe's good. Stripe's great with this. They have their whole. They have like a service that's basically just for foreign nationals trying to open bank accounts and incorporate in the U.S. Like they have I think it's called Atlas or something, Stripe Atlas or something, that they're trying to go into that space. Like we could, but if you find someone like Stripe, that tends to be cheaper than going through lawyers and using our time to fill out the forms and stuff like that.
Yeah. Other questions?
And how big is your company? How many employees do you have?
There's 22 total employees, 14 attorneys, and then 8 support staff.
And during hiring, do you have some special test or request for such people, you know? Because according to what you say, you have some special atmosphere inside the company. So what's the most important skills then for you? I mean, it's like mostly, I guess, human skills, your soft skills.
Yeah, so it's like, it's twofold. It's a great question because it's really hard. Because especially with law, you need people that are really good at being lawyers. So that's the number one thing. And so if you can't do that, even if you're a great person, we're like, all right, like we just need to fit someone in this position. But we won't just put anyone in that position. To your point, like we make that person meet everyone in the firm before we hire them. It's not too many, right? It's only 22 people, but we make them meet everybody, and we really talk about them as an individual. But that's once they've already passed the test of like they're good enough. With lawyers, we send them a hypothetical. We literally send them like a test question and say, tell me about how you handle this situation. So we can see their legal skills in practice. For a lot of our support staff, we give them a bunch of different tests about like how well they are with Excel and Word and like proofreading stuff. Because we want to it's hard when you're a smaller company to like, and no one puts on their resume that I'm not good at something. And they're never going to give you a reference to someone who's not going to say they're great. So you got to like actually give them something to see them in practice. So that's how we kind of test for their skill. And then to your point, like we've messed up. Sometimes we hire the wrong people, and usually it kind of works itself out. But we really try to like make sure everyone like truly likes each other.
And do you do the same?
Actually, no. We have a different hiring process. A big part of our goal is to kind of counterbalance bias that comes up in hiring practice and make what we call an equitable workplace. So our hiring practice is kind of designed around that. And depending on the job, our jobs have very different skills depending on what the job is. So of our 18 people, many of them are administrators, but the kind of administrative skill they need is different depending on what the position is. So it's really more case by case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But do you use cases from third parties?
We don't.
Testing?
Yeah, we haven't done testing. We have done for especially jobs that required a lot of writing samples. We'll ask people to submit writing samples if they're going to be a grant writer or for marketing or a kind of content development position. Mm-hmm. That's the most of testing we've done. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. So any questions?
What about working in the US? I mean, if we are a startup and going to the US market, what kind of visa should we ask for? how we can work in the US and work with customers in the US.
I have a good one pager I can send you that has like all the different visas. It's tough. So the H-1B one is the most common, but that one you need to have a sponsor there, right?
An employer.
And yeah, exactly. And you need to have a special skill set that they can't find in the US is typically how it's worded. So that's a much more difficult one. There's an entrepreneur, there's an entrepreneur one. I forget exactly what it's called. It's like a
B1.
B1. I think it's like B1. You have to put a certain amount of money in. There's no like lower limit. But if you put 10,000, it's not going to cut it. If you put $1 million, you're definitely going to cut it. But I have an immigration attorney I work with, and he says probably somewhere in the 100,000 range if you can deploy that type of money, and into your own startup, and you can show it, like you can get this like B1 visa. And then there's the one where if you put $1 million in and hire 15 people,
I can get paid by my startup in the US if I have B1 visa.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's your company.
For sure.
If
You need to promote it.
For sure.
Okay.
Yep.
If I'm employee of this company.
For sure.
Like a CEO.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that's kind of what it's there for. It give you legal status to be in the US to like run a business.
To run a business. And we have a couple of examples, by the way. I just read in an article. Do you know the resourcevc.ru, or write me, I will send you. Yeah, and guys went there with his marketing team. They are doing internet marketing, digital marketing. So they went to US with this visa, started a business, trying to find new customers, and a lot of, it's like a book. It's like a story how to move your business from Russia, to US and starting it. It's interesting experience, I think.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question about art industry. I just want to, as I understood, the main goal of your company is to build a community. I want to understand what is the main activities do you use?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have 4 core programs. We have an exhibitions program, so we have a large space. It's like 32,000 square foot. I don't know the metric translation of that, but kind of a big warehouse building, and we have gallery spaces, so we show exhibitions by primarily Chicago-based artists. We have an international residency program that brings artists and curators from around the world to live and work in Chicago and connect with the city and its community. We have an education program that consists of a school and teen programs and do some work off-site in the community. And then we have what we call public programs, which is events and things that invite people to come and engage in a kind of a one-time way with art and art making and artists that they're largely event-based. So that's the bulk of what we do. We're open all year round, except for 1 week over the holidays in the winter, and are open every day and free to visit. Yeah, so people come and just walk through. We also have a cafe and act kind of like a community space. I don't know if there's an equivalent to like a community center, but we also are a bit of that. People just come and hang out, and they may not be interested in art necessarily, but can use it as a place to sit and work or meet. There are a lot of people host meetings in our space and then kind of get interested or see the art by chance. Our favorite joke is that like kids will come for the pizza and then decide they want to be artists. They don't realize that that's what they're into, and they end up meeting other friends and creative people. And it's really that kind of physical proximity that builds the community in a way. Yeah.
I'm interested to know about the tax systems, or maybe I don't remember. Maybe tell about it, or what do you feel like a businessman and in this system, and countries need you need to pay the tax your country. I'm interested also know about younger businessmen. When businessmen try to create any deals, they need to pay any tax, and they do you feel any pressure in this situation when you need to pay tax? Our country, your countries have some bias for help you or to want to have just money?
So in terms of tax, yeah, no worries. So you're trying to figure out, like, when you're a young business person and you're starting out, and what are the tax issues that you might have to, like, are you worried about paying taxes versus being taxed too much? When you're a small company, typically there's not really any taxes to start, right? You have to pay money to start your company with the state, and then most states might have a small fee you pay once a year. But the way our tax laws are written, with a lot of companies, not a corporation, but with like an LLC or a partnership, if you're losing money early on, which most companies do, you can actually write those losses off so your taxes go down. So a lot of early stage companies will start as, I know I told you guys that you're going to be a Delaware C corporation, but oftentimes we start companies as LLCs so that they can write off all of their losses when they're young and they're not making any money, and then convert into a different entity later when they're making money, so that it's better for tax reasons. But taxes for kind of young business people are not that big of a deal, right? As you get older and you start making a lot of money, then taxes become kind of a big deal. But early on, you're probably not making any money anyway. And we don't want to make it too difficult for you to start, so the amount of taxes are real little when you're starting off.
Are you asking also about the wanting to give back but not having enough money to do that? Is that your question? Or are you asking about the philanthropic system and how people give money when they also have to pay taxes? And
I'm interested to know about some facilities. Maybe your country, United States, wants to give any facilities for younger businessmen.
Okay, like infrastructure to support young business people.
Like business incubators. Something.
Yeah, there are a fair number of business incubators. WeWork being one, right? Don't they?
They have a bit of an incubator program.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so
I think what the U.S. does really well with the startups is that, like, with entrepreneurship in companies, is that you need an entire, what we call, ecosystem. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to start a company, and it's not just, hey, there's an investor who's going to give me money. There's universities, right? There's nonprofits. There's incubators and accelerators. These are programs that are set up to teach people entrepreneurship and to help facilitate and build their company. So you have to have this, like, full ecosystem, and it starts with the government and the universities kind of supporting it, teaching it, giving money to it, and then it goes to, like, WeWorks and co-working spaces where people can go and meet other people. What Rustam said earlier, where they have, like, pitch competitions and pizza, same thing, right? You bring people food and drink, they will come, and then everyone meets each other and you talk, and that's what kind of creates our ecosystem. And then you create companies, and then you make money, and then you put the money back into another company, but you kind of need all of those elements. And that's one thing that every city's different, but like a city like Chicago or Austin, we're very good at that. And we have a lot of opportunities for people to meet other people that can help them along their journey as a business person.
Yeah.
Other question?
I have two questions. The first, how could I get your contacts to email, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, I have a card.
And my second question is, I would like to send your information about my project, the startup project. And how does it take time to get feedback about the project? How is it?
Can you ask the second question again?
I would like to send your information about my startup project.
Okay.
And how does it take time to get feedback about my project?
I'd be happy. Do you have like a pitch deck or like an outline of what your project is? Yeah, send it to me. I'll take a look at it and give you my thoughts and some feedback on it. I mean, it depends how busy I am, how quickly, but I can't imagine it's going to take me more than a few days to respond to you with something, right? To just tell you my thoughts on what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, other question?
So maybe 10 years ago, all companies in the world sold products. Now they all sell solutions. So what
Yeah.
difference, and am I forced to sell a solution instead of a product?
Well, that's some good marketing those companies have come up with to tell you that they're just selling solutions, because they're still selling. There's only two things that exist in this world, and it's products and services, right? Now, what you're seeing more and more to your idea of solutions is that people are using technology to build software, and that software as a service, we call it SaaS, right? Software as a service is a solution to a lot of problems, right? It just facilitates business more easily, but it's still a service or a product. So I wouldn't get too caught up in like having to create a solution. I think the best products and the best services address problems, and they are solutions to those problems. But that product could be a vacuum cleaner. It's a great solution to a dirty floor, right? Like, how is yours better? Okay, I developed one that doesn't run on electricity, it runs on air. Fantastic. That's a solution, right? Like, so that's a solution to a problem, but you're just selling products or services always. So think of a great product or service that you care about and would like to do, and find a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. So, and last question, we have a time limit, unfortunately. I don't know. So let's start with you.
Okay. What do you think? What is better, to found a startup in Russia, nurture it here, and then relocate to the US, or start from scratch in the US?
I would say start here. I think the ability to, you already have a network here. You're from here. You're thinking about problems that exist in your day-to-day life, right? And I think it's less expensive here than it is in the US in a lot of ways too. So I think you could start here and build something and then take it to the US. Another thing that I think is like fascinating that certain companies do, there's this German group that all they've been doing for the last 10 years is looking at the US and saying, oh, what kind of software they build. And then they just build the same exact software in Germany. And then they just, because they see, and it goes both ways, right? Sometimes there's really great stuff happening in Europe or the Middle East, something that someone in the US would have. But it's like, what's going on in different countries that we don't have in our country yet, right? To think of that and then be the first mover here. Because even in the US, like, WeWork wasn't the first co-working space, right? It's now the biggest in the world. Yeah. And McDonald's wasn't the first person to sell hamburgers. So you don't have to be the first one to do anything. So sometimes it's like seeing what's out there and then carving your own little point, like right here in Moscow, like doing it here, getting really good at that, cornering your market, and then expanding from there. But I think you would be better off, even if you did it for here and then you shut down this company and started from scratch in the US, I think the amount of information you would gain in running your company here first and would make you so much better at starting from scratch in the US, because you know now all the things you kind of want to do, and it wouldn't be as expensive when you finally go into the States. Yeah.
You said it's usual practice in the US that if startup fails, it can start over. And how the founders deals with investors in that case, in case of failing, in case of business and in case of non-profit?
Yeah, you need to be, so the best thing any...
without bankruptcy.
Without bankruptcy?
Yeah.
Well, so there's a number of ways, right? Like, typically an investor will have certain rights. So those rights usually say that if any money comes out of the company, if you have to shut the company down and there's any money, the investor gets it first. So maybe you have $100,000 left in the bank and you aren't going to be able to make much payments. You shut everything down, you take whatever's left and you give it to your investors, right? And you kind of pay them whatever little bit you have left. But you have to remember, these investors do this for a living. Maybe not the friends and families, but fools usually do it for a living. and the higher level investors do too. Most of their investments do not pan out. They know that companies are going to fail. What you need to do is just be very communicative. Communicate, right? Communicate a lot with your investors. The best thing for a startup or an entrepreneur to do is when you have investors is you send an email once a month and you give them an update on everything that's going with the company. Because if they know things aren't going well with the company, one, they might be able to help you. If they had money, maybe they have more. They have contacts. They know people. Oh, this is the problem you have. Oh, you're trying to hire a chief technology officer. Good thing, I know Tom. That's what he does. So you keep them informed because they might help you in some of these times when you could be going in a bad way. And then also, if you tell them every month that revenues are going down, then it's not going to be a shock when in February you say, we're closing the company. They can't fault you for it. You let them know the whole time. If they wanted to put more money in, they could have. If they wanted to introduce you to Tom, they could have. But they didn't. So the more communication you have, the better off you are. And these people will understand when it fails, because most of them do. The worst thing you can do is not tell them anything, shut the door, and try to like slink away. Now they just think like they have a bad taste in their mouth about you. It would probably ruin your career as an entrepreneur in that community. So the best thing to do is just own it, accept it, know your failures, and if they're good investors, they'll take it, you know, understanding that they made a bet essentially and it didn't work out. So just communicate, communicate, communicate. And then,
They will not sue the startup.
unless you did something wrong, you committed fraud. Like I think the WeWork guy is probably going to get sued for fraud. Seems like all the stuff coming out now. But if you don't do anything wrong, then you took the money, you gave them the equity, they got the equity, you spent the money on the things you said you were going to spend it on, and the company didn't work out.
Yeah, and in US you have a business judgment rule. It means that if you did something good in a bona fide, as we call it, in a good way, so in good faith, that means that you are so in secure position of all these claims. The same in Russia.
We often say the business judgment rule that Rustam just talked about. We say it's not illegal to be dumb.
Yeah.
If you're a dumb business person, like you lose money, you didn't commit fraud, you made bad decisions, but like it's your decision to make, right? You have to, like fraud means you made a misrepresentation, you lied. You knew it was false when you made it, and you did it to make this person do something, let's say give me money, and then they actually gave you the money or did the thing. You need all of those things, right, for fraud. Any one of those things you don't get, there's no fraud, right? If you didn't know you were lying when you lied, you're just bad at it. Like you couldn't even get in for fraud. Now, if it's that, you're probably still going to get sued for fraud because if you lied or it looks like you did. But barring that, if you're just honest and you communicate, you just went out of business. It happens all the time.
Law protects the startup.
Yeah, law protects, and the same in Russia. It's protection of the law to make a wrong decision also. So I think the last question really was.
Yeah, nice. So you have told us about investors, yeah? And so I was wondering if there's a case, for example, somebody would like to launch their companies. So where they're supposed to find, for example, investors? What are resources you can recommend? In your opinion, what are the best websites and resources in this case?
That's a great question. It's a very difficult one, right? So I don't know how in Moscow how developed like angel investing is. Is it something here?
We have angel investing. We have special pitch sessions
Okay.
for this, and we have business incubation.
So this is a guy for you. What's your name?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Huh?
What's your name?
I'm Tusi.
Tusum?
Tusi. Without M.
Tusum.
Tusi.
Tusum.
Just Tusi.
Tusum. I'm just gonna mumble it. My apologies. So I'm saying Rustam's name wrong for the last 6 months, I'm sure, but this is your guy, right? Like once you meet, like, because someone like this, an attorney, like if you were in Austin, I'd say, okay, let's sit down. And like, here are the different networks in Austin, like angel networks and groups that you can go to. Here's the different co-working spaces. You should work out of one of them and meet some people, talk about your idea and what you're developing. And that's a good connector, right? Because what you want to start with is before you go to like who's the venture fund in Moscow, and I know there are venture funds here, you'd want to start with like angel networks and high net worth individuals and people that are in that space, and attorneys, CPAs, people that represent a lot of different startups will have that type of information. And then honestly, it is like universities and co-working spaces and talks like this, going to as many of those things as possible to network with people that are in the space. So even if it looks like a boring topic like this one, you go anyway and you like talk to people and you'll like really
to promote your startup, your idea. Yeah. So I think that's the end. The last question. So if you are shy and want to ask question, right? I think guys ready to answer, and me also. So thank you very much for participation.
Yeah.
thank you all.
Thank you.